Hey there, everyone. It's good to see you again, and thank you so much for joining me here today. If we haven't met yet, or if you are new here, my name is Christelle. I am the co founder of Canvas Club and the Creative Crafting Club. And my sister Stefania and I teach women how to start, grow, and profit from kids' crafting clubs. We primarily focus on steam based crafting and use a lot of recycled materials to craft with. It's a lot of fun. So today we are going to dive into session 2 of our 4-part series. The series is called Why Do We Struggle to Let Go When Crafting with Kids? So let me know where you're watching from and how old your kids are. I'm still in beautiful Cape Town and my little toddler is almost 2 years old. So before we dive in, I want to remind you of the brand new awesome freebie that we created specifically for this series. It's a really fun quiz, and you can find out how controlling you are when you are crafting with kids. And then Marlene also helped us with 5 easy ways to encourage creative freedom in an arts and crafts class. This is relevant when you're crafting with your own kids or as a teacher. So be sure to grab that freebie in the link below. Stefani will be posting it in there. It is super great. And then in session 1, Marlene and I spoke about what the harm is to children if parents or teachers don't learn to let go. So we learned about unhealthy dynamics and the creation of codependency between parent and child. And then we also spoke about anxious and perfectionist children. So if you have an anxious or a perfectionist child, or if you battle to let go when you are creating with your kids, be sure to watch this session if you missed out. We will also post that in the comments below, so be sure to click on the link. All right, with no further ado, let's welcome Marlene. So just a quick intro on Marlene. Marlene is an occupational and play therapist who works specifically in the field of mental health and well-being. And for those who missed last week or don't know Marlene yet, Marlene, if you would mind sharing just quickly with everyone who you are and what you do.
Yes, as you've heard from Christelle, I am an occupational therapist and I work specifically in the field of mental health. I work with people with anxiety and depression, various mood and personality disorders, and actually not just people going through a very difficult time in their lives. And I think that is why this theme of letting go is so important, because I think it's something that I deal with on a daily basis. And I know that a lot of parents and teachers are really struggling with that. And you're struggling with that in small little stuff, but we're also struggling with that in our parenting and our teaching. And yeah, so it's lovely to be here. I'm a play therapist. I love everything crafty, and I just really love the process of exploring and growing within yourself to become a better version of you. So yeah, it's lovely to work with you guys again.
Thanks, Marlene. And then last week you gave us a really interesting challenge. It was called the Catch and Count Challenge. So this was a 10-minute activity. It was rather an exercise of awareness. So what we did was we picked an activity with our kids, whether it be setting a table or doing a messy craft, and then we had to count how many times we wanted to interfere unnecessarily in the 10-minute period of time. So I caught myself 4 times in the 10 minutes. You said you were also going to do it. How did yours go? And if anybody did it, please post in the comments how you did.
I have to be honest, it's quite scary. I had to do it with my husband. And when I got around about a count of 5, I thought like I need to stop. Lesson learned. I'm really not letting go. So that was interesting. But I then turned it around and I started counting him and how many times he's struggling to let go. So I think we're both in the same boat, and I'm sure that people listening can agree that as adults we really like to be in control.
Yes, well done. And it's good for him as well to have gone through the challenge. So let's dive into today's theme. Today's theme is, why do we struggle to let go when crafting with kids? So I was lying in bed with my little toddler this morning. The poor little thing has been a bit under the weather. So I showed him an episode of Peppa Pig on my phone in an attempt to distract him. So I love Peppa. Who loves Peppa Pig? It's absolutely adorable. Let me know if you love Peppa as much as I do. Anyhow, so we watched the episode of where Peppa got a homework assignment to make a castle using recycling. So using recycled boxes. So of course, Peppa's parents ended up doing the most of the work. Peppa's only 4 years old, and the craft turned out absolutely beautiful. It was this castle masterpiece. And then, so as a parent and as a kids crafting club owner, this episode really hits a nerve because, I mean, even Pippa's parents are struggling to let go. And I actually want to ask people who's watching, let us know. So if you had to receive this assignment, what would you do? Would you A, set out the boxes and the crafting material and let your child craft away by themselves? Or B, would you hide and let your child figure it out for themselves? Or C, would you get a nearby architect or a friend to stop by after work to assist? Or D, would you jump in and help your child turn the project into a castle masterpiece? So if you chose, C or D, then today's live training is definitely for you. And if you picked A or B, then stick around because there's definitely something to learn from Marlene today. So Marlene, long story short, why do we as parents struggle, and why does Pippa's parents even struggle to let go when crafting with kids?
I was shy, poor Peppa Pig and his parents, because I think his parents want the best for him. And I think that the best for him is a beautiful castle, because obviously who doesn't want a magnificently beautiful castle? But what Peppa Pig's parents are missing is that they are taking away the opportunity for him to learn and to grow on his own. And so I'm really reflecting about what we said last week about let go and let grow, and how we really want the best for our kids. And we want them to learn through play, and therefore we have to step back. But the question is, why are we struggling? And I think it's the acknowledgement that we were children ourselves at a stage, probably a few years ago, but that we were also parented through a process where perhaps letting go and letting grow was not done onto us. So unfortunately, a lot of these issues that we see with why are we holding on to things so desperately comes from our own childhood experiences and how we are parented. And so that is very interesting. And if you guys can grant me a second or two to explain that, I'm hoping that you'll can see this as I'm trying to draw this for you. So every child is born as this beautiful, magnificent, pure being. And this is really wonderful because this child is pure, creative, they've got such a lot of abilities. But then unfortunately, this child does not exist in a vacuum. And so things happen to a child. And I don't know if you've realized this about your children or the children in your classes, but they've got the ability to creatively adapt. It's almost like a cat. They can jump back on their feet when they need to. So from a very young age, we learn that because remember, it's about survival. So say, for example, my parents are fighting a lot. And so as a child, I want safety and I just want things to be okay. And so when they fight a lot, what I do as a child is I become very, very quiet, because if I'm very quiet, then my parents don't fight so much. And so this behavior continues into another behavior of staying very quiet. And now my teacher is a little bit loud. And so I become quiet in that scenario. And you almost end up with, if you can see this drawing, with like a whole lot of things where we adapt and we change our behavior in order to stay safe. Unfortunately, it hinders our own growth and process. And we are not those exuberant, beautiful, creative children anymore. We are children with barriers. And this behavior we often carry into our adulthood. So now that's actually where we're at, is that as children we adapt, but we don't always adapt in the nicest way. And then as adults, we carry on those behaviors of adaptation, and that becomes the way we function. So we were not just growing, we were adapting to stay safe.
That makes a lot of sense. And it doesn't necessarily come out of a bad place as a parent, because I know for myself, as an almost 2 years old parent, and I've seen this from mutual friends as well, we've been wanting to educate our kids from the womb, exposing, I know for myself, I wanted to expose them to the most intellectually stimulating music, literature, all those kinds of things, even before he could crawl. I mean, it's ridiculous. And my husband and I did research on so many things, the best preschool, the best crib mattress, the best enrichment opportunities, all kinds of things. And it is all because we just want to do the best, but we can be so overprotective and overbearing and overwhelming at times. And I mean, I love the advice of, let them try and fail, but it seems obvious, but it is hard to implement.
It's so interesting. Yeah, we spoke about helicopter parenting last week as well. And I think helicopter parenting is born from a need to have things perfectly, for things to be completely okay and right. The unfortunate thing about helicopter parenting is that you are so providing the external for the child that you are missing the child's core needs. And in ourselves, that is often missed. And we have to remember something extremely important here, that parents do their best within their capacity. So we can't actually blame parents for doing something wrong because they just do their best. If you think about the generation of parents that parented us, children were seen and not heard. So children were told to just kind of do your own thing. So we, for example, didn't have the exorbitant amounts of affection and attention that children these days get. But as children ourselves, probably we were yearning for that. Isn't that then just natural that as adults, we want attention all the time? Our whole selfie industry shows this. And so what is so interesting about that is that now we give that to our children. But that is what we wanted and not necessarily what our children wanted.
And I've seen this. I remember at school, there used to be these parents that would run next to the sport field like complete maniacs, screaming instructions and, telling the kids this to do this and that.
Yes, absolutely. It's about that vicariously living through your child, but almost wanting your child, can I almost say, like seeing yourself in your child. So what you wanted as a child and you didn't get, you are now just projecting onto your own child. And in that way, we are not giving them what they need. I can tell you that the child probably doesn't want you to run up and down like a mad photographer, shooting every half second of their miniature rugby game. They just want you to be present. But unfortunately, what we lack, we either overcompensate for or we recreate. And that's how we adapted. We wanted to do something to get what we needed. And we could continue with that in our lives.
And then could you give us some advice? What as individuals is it that we actually do need when we are growing up?
Unfortunately, it's quite an intense process of having to understand what you didn't get. And so if we say, for example, let's take the sports game and say, I didn't have a dad that could come and watch my sport matches just because my dad was busy. And so what was going on there really was that my dad was trying to provide for the family. So as an adult, we need to understand why we didn't get what we wanted. Once we understand, there's unfortunately a process of grieving. We can never go back 30, 40 years in time and get what we wanted. But we can now grieve it and say, I'm so sorry that I grew up without a parent that was on a rugby field. And so in that way, we are starting to process what has happened to us. The last step of this process is called reparenting. Now, this is where we give ourselves what we needed. What is so important about reparenting, however, is that we give it to ourselves. Can you hear how in our normal lives, we give that to our children rather than to ourselves? The problem with this is that our own need is never met because my parents are not going to meet it for me. My spouse is not going to meet it for me. My children or the children in my class, my job is not going to give it to me. The only person that can reparent me is me. So if you think about the whole, I just needed a parent to be there and say yay at the rugby field, I probably need to tell myself, well done, you did a good job at X, Y, and Z today. And so if you really think about it quite quickly, it's understand, grieve, and reparent. In that way, you can heal and hold yourself rather than transferring these unmet needs onto our children or the children that we teach.
I've actually heard about some soccer leagues that have implemented, they call it Silent Soccer Saturdays, and it's in an attempt to silence parents and coaches and to give back to the kids. So it is a worldwide phenomenon, and I think it comes along with the selfie type of era that we are living in. So very interesting.
Isn't that beautiful? Because we allow our children to get what they need, Nay, isn't this what it's all about? What Creative Crafting Club is all about and Canvas Club is all about? It's let's give our children what they need. Let's give them the opportunity to learn and grow. And by not letting go, by holding on, by being controlling of their process, I almost want to go as far as to say that we are stealing from their experiences for ourselves rather than processing this for ourselves.
Yeah, and this ties in very well with what we discussed last week. So for those who have missed it, just be sure to click on the link and watch that, because Marlene gave some really great tips, and the freebie also gives some great tips on how to let go. So Marlene, it is really difficult to change behavior. And I know that for myself, and it is not just for learning to let go with children, it's with everything. I mean, with exercising, I'm sitting here in my running running pants and tackies, running shoes, because I have the intention to, after this, put on my shirt and go for a run. And I've committed by dressing up, so halfway, but it's tough. It is really tough to change behavior. So do you have any recommendations? I mean, we're going to chat more about, practical tips on how to change ourselves and our, some change in children in the next 2 sessions, but do you have something to add on to how difficult it is to change behavior?
Change is very difficult. It's always very difficult, but I think what we're also looking for is long-lasting change. And for me, that's a whole different thing. So I'm all for practical advice, and I'm all for kind of changing things here and there, and that is important in our process. But if we really think about this and we want a long-term effect and a long-term shift in our parenting or in our teaching, then what we need is a long-term internal shift. So I always use this analogy of a tree. So say, for example, I've got a thorn tree and I really desperately want an apple tree. So often, specifically with our controlling behavior, we go, I'll just cut off these branches. And if the branches fall off, then suddenly this is going to be an apple tree. Not the truth. Or I'll say, listen, I'm going to cut the branches off and I'm just going to stick a little sellotape, and it might look like a craft project itself, apple branches onto the thorn tree. Changing behavior, unfortunately, doesn't change the core. And I think this is what we often do as parents and teachers, is we desperately read a self-help book or do something, and we change our behavior on the surface. And then we go, I've tried so desperately not to yell at this child. I've tried so desperately not to take over, but it's not changing. And this is why we say we need to change the core. We need to heal our own wounding. We need to give ourselves what we need. And in a way, then all of these beautiful practical tips will flow more naturally. So I often speak about not the what, but the why. I can quickly change. It's so interesting with you and the running shorts. It's quickly to say, okay, I'm just going to put on my clothes and then I'm going to be ready. But would that motivation not be so much different if I say why I am running is for my own health and sanity and well-being, and actually because I deserve it and I love myself? Isn't that more motivation? So if we can change the why for ourselves, then it's so much easier to change the what.
Makes absolute sense. I absolutely love that. It's happened before where I had a bit of a scheduling issue, and I was picking up my son and I was rushing off, and I had a class, with 15 kids waiting for me, and I had a bit of a hiccup at home, and I became quite frantic and flustered. And then having to have that, all perfect smile and the right attitude when you arrive at a class, and, all these beautiful children looking up at you, ready to cry, you actually feel a bit, woo. Do you have any advice on how you can deal with something like that?
I love what you're saying, because I think we need to remember that we are human. This is the whole process of this, is that we are not superhuman beings that can sort out all of our issues and suddenly we are the best parents and teachers. But that we will have days where our own issues bubble up. And remember that when you are in a frantic state, our childhood needs and wounding come up a little bit more. So in Gestalt therapy, there's a beautiful concept called bracketing. I love it. Imagine now 2 brackets. And when you have a sentence and you have something in bracket, it's not that you are excluding that information. It's just not as important as the overarching sentence. So we're not saying that when you are with your child or with the children in your class, you should be a superhuman being and be amazing and sort it out and neglect the rush that you had. You've had it and it's part of you. But what we're saying is put it in brackets. It is not relevant right now. And right now, you need to kind of shift focus and focus on the children in the class or focus on the lesson. And so take a moment, take a breath, do something a little bit grounding, bracket that, and then enter the class or the session. You can always later go back and access that information again. And I think that is what our previous catch and count activity was so nice. And is just catch yourself when you are in that state of panic. You can always take that and later on, when you're quiet and when you're having a cup of tea, process what actually happened today. Why did I go into control freak mode? Well, actually, because I felt uncontained. And maybe the rushness remind me of feeling unsafe as a child. And therefore, I wanted to impose safety on the children by being completely overbearing in my style today. And so if I can start to become aware of that, I can start to go back to the process of, this was interesting. What did I need? Rather than give that over to the child. Yeah, so bracketing is a lovely concept. And I recommend it for teachers. And I really recommend grounding yourself a little bit before you go into any session. Even parents coming from work, do something that you can kind of bracket your day a little bit so that when you are there, you are not taking your stuff onto your interaction with your children, but that you are focusing on them.
I find myself practicing all the time. I mean, I was sitting thinking about dinner whilst we were going live, and then I was like, oh, better put that in a bracket because it's not important right now.
Absolutely. I love that. What is so important about that, however, I love what you're saying, and I think those things are nice to bracket and important to bracket. But remember that if you are always bracketing stuff and you never go back to them, they become the issues that you deny or reject or suppress. Luckily, dinner you can't suppress because it's happening in a few hours. But also be careful that you don't bracket and never deal with it. The whole point of shifting the thorn tree into an apple tree is actually dealing with the root of why you are struggling to let go.
I love that. That's very, very, very valuable. Marlene, is there anybody? Thank you, Henri, for your lovely comment. I love bracketing. So important to just deal with it later, not let everything out. Thank you for giving that. And then I see the links are also in the comments, so be sure to grab the first part of the series and also to grab the freebie. And then, Marlene, you've prepared another fun challenge for us today.
Yes, I have. It's a tough one, guys. I am sorry about this. This is a little bit tough. It's again an awareness activity. And I think why it's important that we have awareness activities is exactly what Christelle and I spoke about now. You don't want to just go and willy-nilly change your behavior, but it's not long lasting. So this week is a reflection kind of activity. So somewhere in the week, open up about 10 minutes for yourself. And I know that you're always going to say, I don't have time. I don't know where I'm finding the time. Make some time. Have a nice cup of tea. Set up a space for yourself. I personally like to write a little bit because it helps the flow of my thoughts. But I almost want you then to sit there and go and reflect about an incident with your child or a moment that you felt like you took over. And then actually go back and go and ask yourself, what did you need in that moment? And how does that reflect back to what you needed as a child? Okay, so this is quite complex. Think about what you needed and then go a little bit further and think about, did you also need this as a child? And so that's the first part of the reflection, is to reflect what was it that you needed? Then I want you to take it a slight step further and say, did my child really need it? And what is it that they needed? So if we can take an example of, let's take the example of the sport again, just because we're busy with that, go and reflect back and say, I actually needed the affirmation and the shouting and the validation. What is it that my child needed? My child actually just needed my presence. So that would be an example. Don't worry about it being right or wrong. This isn't about right or wrong. Remember, that's why we have this whole series, is because we are too much in right and wrong. This is just about starting to explore what you are giving your children, which is actually something that you want and need.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I can imagine, I'm just thinking out loud of my example. I quite like, polka dot clothes. And I know that for Stefani, my sister, as well. I mean, she dresses like in the most bizarre, beautiful, funky clothes with neon yellows and polka dots, and and my mom is not like that. So I can only imagine that, one day Stefani and myself might end up, if we have daughters, dressing them up in, these funky clothes, because that's a reflection of what we are and how we to do things. Did I understand the assignment correctly?
Yes, absolutely. I'm laughing because it's very similar for me as well. Is that my clothing is a creative expression, and I think that's part of my childhood need. Growing up quite rural, and in a certain society that said this is how you should look or dress or feel, is that it's an absolute expression of who I am. And I think that's important. Remember, if we go back to what we said earlier about reparenting. So reparenting is about giving yourself what you need. It is about going back and almost, I love the word restitution, to go and heal and to go and build a bridge over the things that was hurting or difficult for you coming throughout your childhood. We just need to be very mindful of where we bridge or restitute or reparent with the negative stuff. So, for example, over controlling what my child wears and constantly telling my child this is right and this is wrong, and maybe dressing my child like a princess because that's what I wanted, whilst my child actually doesn't want to wear that dress. That's where it becomes harmful. If we go back to the harmful, I don't want to give this to my child. If I can give it to myself, yes, that will go over to my child. Sorry, I'm interrupting myself because I have to say this. I've often thought about this concept, and I think about, how we always say, our children just want love and attention, and they just want, our presence and all of that. And I completely disagree. I think our children just wants us to be happy, because if I am happy, my cup is filled, that can spill over to the child. So if I can dress how I want to dress, and I am confident and secure and kind of whole in myself, then that love will naturally flow over. That confidence will naturally flow over to my child, to my teaching, to my parenting. So I think the big thing here for us as parents and teachers is to start to look after our own needs in order to support the needs of our children.
That is beautiful. I think you should write a quote on that. I think that is absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Marlene. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up?
I just really want to go back to that thing that I said earlier around every parent do their best within your capacity. So guys, don't be hard on yourselves if you kind of made a mistake, or if you were in a class and you taught something and it just went haywire. I think the most important thing is to start to use these experiences as learning lessons rather than judgment and self-punishment and self-flagellation sessions. It's like, what have I learned? What have I realized? And how can I adjust it going forward? So with all of us here and with Christelle and Stefani, the idea is really to say, let's grow a healthy community of people that know how to support our children in our classes and our parenting the best.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marlene, for your time. And then everybody remember to grab the quiz. It's free. And then Marlene gave us some really five easy ways to encourage greater freedom. So be sure to grab that. And we will see you next week, same time, same place. And then we're going to get some answers and some tips as to how we can improve. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks, Marlene, and thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful day, guys. See you next week.
Cheers. Bye.